At my mother's funeral, she sat on his lap and whispered, "At least I still have you." Those words didn't just sting, they split me open. Imagine burying the woman who raised you, standing graveside with your heart already in pieces, only to glance across the room and see your wife perched on another man's lap, like the funeral was nothing more than a backdrop for their little secret. I wish I could tell you my first reaction was to shout, to drag her away, to break him in half right there in front of everyone. But I didn't. I froze. It was raining that day. A light drizzle, the kind that makes black umbrellas look like shadows against the sky. People shuffled under the awning, their voices hushed, their eyes red. I stood beside the coffin, numb, my hands clenched in fists inside my pockets. My mother's death was enough hollow me out. I thought the grief was the worst pain I'd ever feel, until I looked across the room. There she was, not standing, not mourning, not even pretending. She was sitting on him, his lap, her lips pressed close to his ear, and then she whispered it, "At least I still have you." His hand squeezed her hip like it was the most natural thing in the world. The sound around me vanished. The rain, the prayers, the murmured condolences, they all dissolved into silence. All I could hear was the echo of her words bouncing inside my skull. "At least I still have you." Not me, him. Do you know what betrayal feels like when it collides with grief? It's not just heartbreak, it's humiliation, laced with rage, a cocktail so bitter it makes your stomach turn. My knees almost buckled. For a moment I thought I might collapse right there in the mud. But I didn't. I straightened my shoulders, fixed my gaze on the coffin, and told myself, not here, not now. I got through the burial like a machine. Handshakes, nods, hugs from relatives. I don't even remember their faces. My mind replayed that scene on a loop. The way she leaned into him, the way his arm curled around her, the intimacy of two people who weren't supposed to exist in the same sentence. My wife, and him. He wasn't a stranger. That's what made it worse. He was a family friend, someone I'd trusted for years, someone who'd eaten at my table, laughed with me, shared drinks with me. And she chose him not in secret, not hidden, but in the middle of the most vulnerable moment of my life, at my mother's funeral. When the last of the mourners left and the umbrellas folded away, I stayed behind. I stood there alone in front of the grave, staring at the freshly turned earth. My heart was a storm. My mother was gone. My wife had betrayed me. My best friend had become my enemy. I wanted to scream at the sky, but instead I whispered, "I'll handle this, Mom. I promise I'll handle it." That night she came home as if nothing had happened. She dropped her shoes by the door, sighed dramatically, and said, "What a long day." She hugged me from behind in the kitchen, resting her head against my back. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she whispered, like she hadn't just been whispering to him hours before. I stood there frozen, her arms around me like chains. My chest burned, but I didn't push her off. Not yet. Because I realized something. Shouting at her wouldn't fix it. Punching him wouldn't fix it. Betrayal this raw isn't healed by noise. It's only healed by strategy. And in that moment, my grief transformed into something else. A plan. I started watching her. Closely. I paid attention to every detail I used to ignore. The way her phone stayed face down on the table. The way she suddenly showered longer after errands. The way she dressed differently on nights she said she was meeting friends. At first I doubted myself. Grief makes you paranoid. But then I caught the signs. A text notification lighting up her screen with his initials. A receipt from a hotel tucked into her purse. A lipstick stain on a wine glass when she told me she hadn't been drinking. Piece by piece the puzzle formed. And I didn't confront her. I documented everything. I became my own detective, my own archivist. Screenshots, photos, notes, every lie she told. I pinned it down like a specimen, because I knew this wasn't just about my marriage. This was about dignity. She'd taken that from me at my mother's funeral, in front of everyone. I wasn't going to take it back quietly. Living under the same roof became a performance. I kissed her cheek in the mornings, asked about her day, held her hand when we went out. She thought she was winning. She thought she had fooled me. But inside, I was miles ahead. Every day she lied. She gave me another weapon to use later. And him. He still came around. Less often, more cautiously. But still he'd clap me on the back, offer condolences. About my mother. Look me in the eye like he wasn't the man my wife whispered to at her funeral. I shook his hand, forced a smile, and thought about the day I'd crush him with the truth. The turning point came one evening when she left her diary open on the nightstand. I don't even think she realized she'd done it. Inside, page after page, she wrote about him, about how he makes me feel alive again, about how losing her mother-in-law made him realize how precious life is. My stomach turned reading that. My mother's death, my grief, had become fuel for their affair. That's when I knew this wasn't just betrayal. This was war. I closed the diary, turned off the light and lay beside her while she slept. My mind raced, not with pain anymore but with precision. If she wanted to humiliate me in the most public, painful way imaginable, I was going to return the favor. Not with rage, not with fists, but with truth. Cold, undeniable, merciless truth. Because she thought sitting on his lap at my mother's funeral was her boldest move. She had no idea it was the move that sealed her fate. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while she slept soundly beside me. Her breathing was steady. Her body curled slightly toward me, like we were still a couple united in grief. But I knew better. Every inhale she took felt like an insult, a performance of normalcy. The image of her at my mother's funeral burned in my mind, her perched on his lap, her lips brushing his ear, the words she thought nobody would hear. At least I still have you. Those 7 words did more than expose her. They rewired me. I realized I was done being a passive character in her play. She had written a script where I was the fool, grieving while she clung to another man. But she didn't realize I'd already stepped off stage. From that night on, I wasn't her husband in denial. I was her reckoning. I started with his name. It wasn't hard. Phone records, social media, shared photos I'd once scrolled through absent-minded. They both underestimated how easy it is to leave trails when you're careless, and convinced no one is watching. They thought grief blinded me. It hadn't. It sharpened me. I found their messages, not just a few texts, but long exchanges about missing each other, about the future, about how he would protect her from the sadness of being trapped. Trapped. That's how she described me. Her husband, the man burying his mother, the man who built her a home, and him, the man who warmed the seat at her funeral, was her liberation. I documented everything. Screenshots, voice memos, even the way their contact names changed. First a nickname, then an emoji, then something neutral when they feared suspicion. But they didn't know I was 3 steps ahead. And still I didn't confront her. That would have been too easy, too clean. She humiliated me in public, at the lowest point of my life. I wanted her to feel what I felt. That hollow, exposed, unfixable burn that comes when your world shatters in front of witnesses. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My cousin suggested a memorial dinner for my mother a month later. It'll help you heal, she said. Family, close friends. A chance to remember her properly. The irony didn't escape me. The same people who'd seen my wife betray me at the funeral would be there. The same faces that had looked away politely, pretending they hadn't noticed her perched on him. This time I thought, they won't be able to look away. I said yes. In the days leading up to the dinner, I prepared my arsenal. I printed their texts. I printed their photos. Yes, even the intimate ones, carefully chosen so there'd be no maybe it's innocent excuse. I compiled bank statements, receipts, hotel confirmation. I even found flight bookings where she told me she was traveling for work, but instead had spent long weekends with him. All of it, bound neatly in an envelope. The night of the memorial, the restaurant glowed softly with candlelight. People hugged me, offered condolences, shared stories of my mother. I listened, smiled, nodded, but inside my pulse was steady, my mind clear. Because I knew what was coming. She arrived on my arm, dressed beautifully, her hand slipping into mine like nothing was wrong. She smiled at my family, laughed at their jokes, even dabbed her eyes when someone shared a touching memory. She looked every bit the grieving, supportive wife, and everyone played along, maybe because they wanted to believe the version of her they'd always known. Halfway through dinner, my cousin asked me to say a few words. I stood, my chair scraping back, and the room quieted. She looked up at me, her face soft, expectant, ready to play the part of my anchor in grief. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice calm. "It means everything to have you here." Remembering my mother. She was a woman of honesty, of loyalty, of love that never faltered. Heads nodded, glasses raised slightly. She reached for my hand under the table, but I didn't take it. "And because tonight is about honesty," I continued, pulling the envelope from my jacket pocket, "I think it's time you all see the truth." I opened the envelope and laid the photos and papers across the table. Conversations stopped. Forks froze mid-air. The first photo sat on top, her sitting on his lap in a hotel room, kissing his cheek. Gasps rippled through the room. "She told me she was working late," I said softly, my eyes never leaving hers. "She told me she was traveling for conferences. She told me she was by my side in grief. But this," I tapped the photo, "this is where she was instead." She lunged for the papers, her hands shaking, her face pale. "Stop, please. This isn't—" "Don't," I cut her off, my voice louder now. "Don't insult everyone's intelligence." "You sat on his lap at my mother's funeral and whispered those words thinking no one heard. I heard, and now everyone else will too." The silence that followed was brutal. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face hardened like stone. My cousin whispered, "Oh my God." The weight of the truth filled the room, crushing every excuse she could have formed. She broke then. Tears streamed down her face, her words tumbling out in a mess of apologies, explanations, denials, but none of it mattered. The evidence lay bare, undeniable, spread across the table where everyone could see. And him? He wasn't there. He didn't have the courage to face the fallout. But his absence only made it worse for her, because it meant she stood alone in the wreckage, her so-called true love, nowhere in sight. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. I simply gathered the papers back into the envelope, slipped it into my jacket, and looked her in the eye. "You thought you had him," I said quietly enough that only she could hear, "but you lost everyone else." Then I walked out. I left her standing there surrounded by the silence of people who once respected her. The woman who thought she could whisper secrets in plain sight had finally been silenced by the truth. The aftermath spread like wildfire. My family cut ties with her. Friends stopped returning her calls. His wife filed for divorce within weeks. His company distanced itself from him, and the two of them, the couple who thought they could build a future on ashes, crumbled under the weight of exposure. As for me, I rebuilt, slowly, painfully, but stronger. Because betrayal doesn't end you. It teaches you. It strips away illusions and leaves you standing with nothing but truth. And truth, once revealed, is impossible to bury again. Sometimes I still think about that day at the funeral, her on his lap, her whisper burning in my ears. "At least I still have you." And I realize now she was right. She had him, and I had the truth. And in the end, the truth outlasted them both.